Hello, good evening. Welcome to I'mPossible Conversation. I'm delighted to have Dr. Rebecca Williams Dinsdale on I'mPossible Conversation tonight. Dr. Rebecca has had a great deal of illness, but no matter how she felt, she never gave up. She completed her doctorate, conducted thousands of loving funerals, given many lectures, and also written books. Rebecca refused to be reduced by all challenges and obstacles thrown to her way. Instead, she decided to inspire thousands and bring happiness in other people's lives by her Lifejoy toolkit. Welcome, Rebecca. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege.
How has your day been?
It's been lovely. I've been looking forward to you all day.
Mm-hmm.
And your introduction was too kind. It was too kind by far.
I like looking at you and listen to your stories. It's just like you are one inspirational woman. It's just been amazing. So I'm so glad to have you. You're launching the Lifejoy month in November. Could you tell us the story of the Lifejoy and story of you and why your passions bring people Lifejoy?
Well, thank you. You ask such nice questions. We must thank you, first of all, because you run this beautiful entity that is so positive and so hopeful. So the first credit must go to you for having us all. But really, I've had great amounts of challenge in life, but I've also had great love, great support, and great unity. So I must acknowledge that first. I took my first school assembly when I was just 7 years old, and I have to say I was so tiny. I had to stand on the teacher's chair, and my little legs were knocking with nerves, but I absolutely loved it, and I felt like there was electricity flying up my feet. And in some strange way, I had written something, and the teacher had liked it, and I then had to read it in front of the assembly and say some prayers, and I just suddenly thought, this is where I'm meant to be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But how you get there to where I am now is quite a meandering path, not without its delays and meanders. But in many respects, I have had very few choices. So the things I have been able to do are only because that's all I've been able to get to do. So lots of people have lots of choices in life. When you've got very few, you have to make the most of them and be very grateful for the blessings that you do have. So I have been very fortunate. I've had magnificent parents. I have a beautiful husband, and I have a lovely support network. So I have, in many respects, had many blessings. But I would also wish to use all of the experiences that I've had to some loving purpose. And really, that's what Lifejoy is about. And I've had a lot of education. I've had a lot of experiences, and I want to use those to some good outcome. So my Lifejoy work really started 10 years ago as my health improved. Because at 17, I was very sick. I had glandular fever, and then overnight, my physical health was ruined. And every decision I have made in the last 29 years has been affected by my physical health. So I did A-levels one at a time on a couple of hours of school a week. I then did a part-time degree, 1/6 time. Stayed at home, went to lecture for an hour, came home, recovered. It was a very long haul. But again, my university at Sunderland were kindness and patience itself. They knew I was devoted and they knew I was diligent, but they were patient and enabling too. I then managed to speed up to 1/3 time, which was a bit of a joke, but a third time was better than no time. And I was still having, 12 to 40 weeks a year in bed or hospital or housebound for 20 years, really. So, there were many, many interruptions. And then there was a quiet blessing that really helped me, was that the university started to notice that I was trying so hard under, arduous conditions. So they asked me to give motivating talks to their students. And suddenly I was home. I was back to being 7 again, doing what I should be doing, hopefully, except that I'd go and do a talk for an hour, and then it would take me a fortnight to recover. So, it was an odd balance. And then another blessing happened in that university asked me to stay to do a master's degree. I did well through that. I then did a doctorate, slowly but surely. And thank God I managed to get through that and was well taken care of. So by then, what I was doing all the time was looking for inspiration, for heroic people who would inspire me forward in this still restricted life. And at the end of all of that, I managed to think about what I could offer. And I'd had lots of consultants. Somebody said I was unemployable and that I had to just realize that. And that's a difficult thing to hear when you're in your 20s and you're wanting to contribute to the world.
Yeah. And probably at that time, the self-employed and everything, that wasn't as popular as it is now, isn't it?
Well, I didn't know anybody who was self-employed. I didn't know it was possible. You know, I'd had parents who'd had big careers. My grandmother had been a missionary to China and run a mission hospital in the 1930s. You know, we were not in the world of, you know, making your own work. But then something happened was I sat in our front room chair and thought, after I'd finished my doctorate, what on earth can I do? And I was already giving talks and doing services. And I just made a little note of what possibly I could offer. And I wrote the words I wanted to hopefully write, to speak, and hopefully inspire, and that bring some joy and some loving purpose. So I had lots of permutations on what my work would be. But in the end, I've spent most of the last decade as a celebrant, taking funeral services and writing and speaking. So that's where we are. But the pandemic changed everything because my health is still quite challenged, although thankfully much improved. So I had to shield, and I thought, well, I can't. I loved my clients and my colleagues so much, and it was such a privileged existence. But then I just thought, well, if I have to stay in, I have to do something useful. So I set about my second book, and I set about restructuring my Lifejoy work so that it was still the essence of those values, but that just in a different mechanism.
Yeah, let's talk about being a celebrant. What did you learn? What's the great lessons you've learned from there? Because nobody's in that position. Because,
Yes, it's a very, very rare vocation. And I had done a lot of church services and loved those and still do. It's just that I was the middle ground as a celebrant for people who wanted some connection to some faith, but also didn't want an entirely humanist service. So I was the middle ground. And what I always tried to do was write services that families would love, but would help their grief, help them see the blessings that they were given in their wonderful loved one, and to see their unity. And that there were really three great lessons that kept coming, and they came week after week, month after month. And I just saw profoundly how much people love each other. And I would see a hand outstretched in an aisle helping somebody up. I would see mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, boyfriends, girlfriends, neighbours, partners, children, aunties, nieces, nephews, build family units that were so profoundly inspiring that however mad the world is, if you had seen what I had seen, you would have hope. So, and I saw how much people loved each other and how much they did for each other. And so what I saw was courage, courageous love every hour. And, you know, I was at the extremes of life. I'd had an absolute ton of illness. I'd had also very poorly parents, and my mother was at the end of her life for much of that 10 years. So I was looking after somebody in a desperately poorly state. And then I'd go to work and try and look after people in a worse state. And yet they were brave, they were resourceful, they were united, they were trying to do their best for their families. And the more I saw of that, the more addicted I became to them. And people used to say clients, and I used to think, they're not my clients, then I used to think, well, what can I call them? Because effectively, you know, I was there to do a job for them, take a service. But they became my people, and then they became my treasures, because the vast majority of people I really love in my life now, I have had some connection or taken a funeral service for them, for a member of their family.
I wonder, Sorry, yeah. I wonder, like, how did you start to that vocation? How did you go that direction, like at the beginning?
Yes.
What made
Well,
you?
yes. When I was 7, I didn't stand up and think, "Oh, I'll be a celebrant." You know, it
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
even know it
obviously.
existed. But I'd grown up in a church where there was no place for women, and
Mm,
I saw my grandmother, who had learnt Chinese in a year, run a mission hospital, fought for her staff who used to get taken by the Japanese authorities to prison. And she couldn't even read a lesson or be in the choir or take a service. And she was the most phenomenally capable woman, as was my mother. And my mother would go and wash up at the church events. But yet, you know, she was an intelligent, educated, capable woman. So there was a dissonance there for me. And obviously, as you know, the church has caught up somewhat with society and the gifts that all of us have to offer. I found some place there, but I also found that being a celebrant was able to celebrate somebody's life, and to hold them up and say, they belong to us, we love them, we rejoice in them, and their goodness stays with us. So that's how I got there. And I went to a lot of funerals, and my mother was very ill, and we knew that this would be coming for her at some point. And I was with my dad at a funeral of somebody we really loved, and we went to several that year. And he leant into me and he said to me quite fiercely, he said, "We'll have to do something for your mother, and you'll have to do it." And I thought, "What do you mean, Daddy?" You know, and you know,
mm-hmm,
I was taking normal services by then, so I'd done certain sets of training, and I went on to find out about celebrant training,
mm-hmm,
and I did that, and I found I was doing the occasional motivational talk, but the services, I was just drawn to them because the quality of the people I kept meeting was just so impressive. And, you know, an honourable, diligent funeral director is an absolute gift to this world. And I met many of them. And they would look after the family on one side, and I would try and love them on the other side. And we could make a service together that would let their loved
mm-hmm,
one shine, but also comfort them and give them some hope. And there were many that were beyond tragic. And I have few words to describe that depth of grief. But with that grief was the courage and the love. And I saw people walk into a chapel absolutely broken and make no fuss. They were magnificent. They were proper heroes. And I think we use the word hero so easily these days. But
mm-hmm,
these were people who'd given up their jobs and their lives to tend a sick person. They'd had sick children. They'd had a poorly teenager. They'd lost somebody unexpectedly. Accident, illness. People had died through suicide and depression. You know, the world has been a very hard experience for them.
mm-hmm,
And yet they were not embittered. And that was the example that kept drawing me to them.
mm-hmm. So, you mentioned about that's like absolutely amazing, and you mentioned about you started Lifejoy about 10 years ago. So, what's the Lifejoy is about? Is it all about simple things?
It is. It is, because the more you learn about having had so much illness, then you go and look after people who've had more illness and more suffering, is that the capacity of the human soul is much stronger and greater than we think. So my life joy values were about appreciating the tiny treasures, I always call them tiny, the smaller they are, the better, of
Mm-hmm,
life, of everyday experience. And I always think of the phrase, the wealth of our own normality. And to just be able to function and have jobs and go to school and have normal life. And obviously, we're in a very abnormal stage in all of our lives at the moment. But
mm-hmm,
people who are chronically sick, degeneratively ill, severely mentally ill, and severely disabled live in pandemic and lockdown conditions all the time. And when we're all healthy and well, and want to go out and want to go to parties and have happy times,
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy to take all of that for granted. But
Yes.
to be joyous that we can buy our own food, cook our own meals, go in the shower, get dressed, talk to people, to be able to see, move, walk, have breakfast outside.
Mm-hmm.
When all those things are taken from you, you value them so enormously that what I really wanted to say in all the work that I've done, whether it be lectures or books or online courses or whatever, is that
Mm-hmm.
value what you have now, because what you have now is a treasure. Even if you don't think it's a treasure, there will be 1,000 people who would swap with you. I'm certain of it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's that
Yeah.
valuing courage, joy, unity, love, and the hope that we can generate and help ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, being in a very extremely different situation, I personally wouldn't call it hard because we still have all these little things. We're alive. We can, it's all about our perspectives, isn't it? So, what your advice would be for the people in like the second phase of lockdown?
Well, I think in some ways, the odd thing about this is that I have been very used to lockdown. So I've had
Mm-hmm.
months and months housebound when very unwell or bedbound, and you're not able to function. So to be in the house, and I call it pottering around and getting jobs
Mm-hmm.
done and hopefully working from home, that is still much better than being very sick in bed and being tortured with pain and being sick all weekend and, relentless pain and difficulty. But that's very easy for somebody to say who's been at the bottom and is looking up. If you've
Mm-hmm.
been well and functioning and had a big life, it's a big shock for people. So I understand
Yes.
that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also to always look down and count our blessings, but to be the blessing, so that
Mm-hmm.
if we're in a mess, because there's a lot of people under tremendous financial stress as well as physical stress and
Mm-hmm.
mental torture, is that if we can manage to help somebody else, it temporarily gives us a respite from our own situations. So my lovely dad is often very poorly, but he on his internet food shops buys an absolute ton of things for the food bank.
Mm-hmm.
And he can't run the food bank, but he can offer something to it. So that example of what can I do to make it better, and even if my making it better is in a tiny palm and it's not very much compared to big heroic gestures, it's that
Mm-hmm.
small effort. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm pleased you've mentioned that, because I've just written a free little ebook and done a video about how to cope through enduring difficulty and
Mm-hmm.
enduring uncertainty, because I think we all feel the rug is pulled from under us, isn't it?
Yes, we are. But
And I,
it's not like that bad, isn't it?
well, I think I try
It's
and
for our own sake.
it is, and I think the more we comply and the more we can do to support the right
Mm-hmm.
moves, is that I
Mm-hmm.
try and keep a perspective, because my husband is a scientist and he is doing the COVID tests in his NHS lab, and he walks past intensive care every day. And I thank God every day that he's not in there, and that there are people in intensive care risking their lives to look after us.
Mm-hmm.
And those poor people on ventilators, if we're in the house, we're not on a ventilator and we're not watching somebody we love be absolutely crucified by that. So I try and look at it that way. But I also know I'm not at the top of a tower block with no money and children and no options, because those are very, very real stresses. But if
Yes.
if people are worrying about Christmas, something that might help a perspective is that I really haven't had a normal Christmas since I was about 15 or 16 in any traditional
Mm-hmm.
sense. And it's all right. The world has not ended because I haven't eaten a Christmas dinner. And I've had Christmases where I've been in house on my own because my husband's been at work or my dad's been really poorly and couldn't cope
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
anything. I've had many Christmases in a nursing home with my mum, lying on a bed, just holding her up in her final years. And I've had 3 Christmases when I went to see my friend in a hospice, and they had no visitors on Christmas Day. So we can put ourselves to some good use. And if we miss a few parties, maybe one time, but we've had 20 years of happy Christmases and we've got another 50 ahead of us, sometimes that perspective can help us cope, because we're given images all the time of more and more stuff, more and more success, all the things that are supposed to be indications of happiness, but actually they're all external. And when you've done funerals for as many people as I have, you realize that everything that truly matters is internal and can't be bought. It can be helped. But when I've seen mothers look after their grandmothers and children look after their very elderly aunts as if they were their most precious soul in the world, it puts everything into perspective.
Yes, absolutely. Totally agree. So today is November 1st, and we've just had an announcement about lockdown yesterday, but you are launching the Lifejoy month.
Yes.
November's going to be a Lifejoy month. Could you tell us about the inspiration behind it, and then what's going to happen in November?
Yes.
Please.
Well, I have to say, I didn't plan this to coincide with a lockdown, but it's
Like, it
unfortunate.
seems like everyone's needed.
Well, I think in some ways I've got a unique position to, I hope, offer something of proportion to this. And I decided in November is a darkening month, isn't it? And
Yeah.
the nights are darker and it's colder.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first thought was, well, I'll have one day called Lifejoy Day. And then I just thought, oh, this could go on for longer. We could make more joy. So it's ended up being a month. And actually, it started last week and it's going to finish a bit later. But I thought we could create some of our own light. So what I wanted to do was I've transformed the way I work. And each week in November, there'll be something released or an interview or something like this to provide some hope and some realism as well. Because I'm not a ridiculous optimist. I know that life is difficult and I know that it is challenging. And I have had so much illness and such an odd life in some ways. You know, I've never been on a plane. I haven't been abroad since I was 16. There's many things I haven't done. I haven't had any children. I haven't had a normal daily life. But that which I have had, I can rejoice in. So Lifejoy was about rejoicing rather than just gratitude. And each week in November, something will be released to encourage your life joy. So there's a series of interviews and events. There's also, hopefully at the end of it, a new book coming. And the second book was written at the start of lockdown because I'm in a lovely business group called Mint. And they teach us lots of tech, but really what they do is they hold us together mentally and spiritually, I think. And it's run with great integrity. And at the start of it, the lady who runs it, called Nicola, gave a live broadcast every day. And really to help people through, especially the people who lost their businesses entirely, just about overnight, and had no income. And she did a broadcast every day. And I tried to think, what could I do to back her up? Because when you're leading something, you need people to back you up quietly. And my dad ran a large organization and I always rejoiced in the people who supported him. So I thought, what can I do? So I wrote a blog every day for 100 days and about keeping going through difficulty. And somebody said that should be a book. And I thought, that's a good idea. And I already had the next manuscript ready, which was about my grandmother. And so I was just going to work on that. So then I thought, well, I'll just write more. So first of all, I thought I'd write 100 meditations. And then I got the rather huge idea that I would write a new book called Your Lifejoy Year, an enriching thought for every day. So there are 365 readings. So it just got out of hand completely. And my husband said, oh, do more than 100, do more than 100. It's be easy. So that's very nearly ready. But that was about coping and seeing the tiny treasures and helping us to help ourselves be more content and more capable. And when we are those things, we are more joyous naturally because we can navigate our way through the world, I hope, with some more clarity and some more vision, because the ripples we have are enormous. The lessons I have learned from people have always been silent ones. All the bravest, loveliest people in my world have just been examples of such integrity that you just pick up these bits of treasure all the time. So that book, in many respects, is a celebration of goodness and hope. And if you're a teacher or you love a teacher, there's quite a lot in about being a lovely teacher in this world. So it's a celebration of goodness, really.
Could you give us an example of how we could extract joy from a tiniest little things?
Well, I'm always very delighted when I can put my own socks and shoes on, which is ridiculous, isn't it? Because we take that for granted. But, you know, and that I can, so for long periods of time, moving was very difficult for me. So I love that I can move my fingers and not be ridiculous about it, but also that, you know, take a lovely deep breath in and feel cold air on the back of your throat. And when you've been tight-chested and it's difficult to breathe, oh, the glory of it. And to go in the shower and feel clean and warm afterwards, and to observe all of life. Because lots of people talk about people watching, don't they? You know, we miss going to our cafes now. It's so nice. I could watch people forever. And when I was ill and in that bedroom for so many months, and well, years essentially, my mum used to come in and sit on the end of the bed, and I'd say, tell me things. And she'd tell me news of the day about the little ones in her class mainly, and her delight in them, and her delight in their kindness and their wit and their, you know, the ridiculousness of being 5. And that you know, she'd sit on their tiny chairs with them and telling the time and sing hymns and play the piano and make them be brave and not let anybody be bullied. And I'd hear all that treasure. So the more we see the treasure, abundance, and I don't like the idea of, you know, think about it and it will come, because I think we have to do some work to make goodness come. But to just look, you see people out for a stroll and you see husbands and wives arm in arm, and the women are always doing all the talking. It's always the same. or little children. Today in our park, the number of wellies that got absolutely trashed in puddles, and daft dogs that won't come back, and balls on a thing that you throw. It's just the beauty of it all. It's just the magnificence of that. And then I would say, don't watch too much news. Don't depress yourself.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So because you live joyous life, and then you just don't do that. You distribute your joy to other people.
Thank you. Well, you're too kind to me. I think you do an awful lot of that.
No. And then because the Lifejoy and the sunflower. Why is it sunflower? There could be any other flowers.
It could be, yes. And I thought about this, but it was very organic in some ways. And there's always a story somehow with me. Is that sunflowers came about in 2 ways. First of all, I always look for a metaphor. What does this mean? What can it teach us? So the sunflower for me, and bright yellow, is that sunflowers are very tall, they're golden, and they seek the light. And they follow the light. And it doesn't matter how much wind or rain or hail or storm bashes them. They're still trying to keep their head up, and they're still seeking the light. And I try to seek joy as much as I can, because I have known what profound sadness and profound misery is. And if you've just got a bit of pleasant, normal day, it's just beautiful. And when you've looked after somebody who is, you know, terminally ill and they are degenerating, and my mum was ill for 14 years, and a vast majority of that was horrific, that teaches you that if you can have an hour of peace in the day, that is something to be grateful for. So I understand joy, because I understand the opposite of it so profoundly that I would not wish people to understand that, because it's just misery. But the sunflower, it just says everything about keeping going. And I was given a packet of sunflower seeds. This is the loveliest thing. And when you're very sick and you're a teenager, I mean, I thank God I got to school till I was 17, because there's lots of very sick children with severe ME who can't go to school at all. And my bravest friend died before she was 35. So there's a lot of very, very poorly, chronically ill people who nobody ever knows are there. They're just stuck in their bedrooms, tortured. Is that when I was very sick, you see, all your friends go away to university and then they get married and then they have babies,
Mm-hmm.
and you're still doing 1/6 time of a degree and you're still in the bedroom and the world is
Mm-hmm.
lapping you. But
Mm-hmm.
one of my friends who I had known since I was 15 brought his new wife to meet me. And they are the most blessed pair. And she bought me a huge candle and some sunflower seeds. And I'll never forget that. She didn't know me, but she said, I thought seeds were a good present because you could just watch them grow. And she said, you can put your candle on and it'll last a long time. And that thoughtfulness of somebody who didn't know me, but brought me a present because I was ill. I remember, so I planted those sunflower seeds, which were about a year out of date because I was too ill to do them that year. And they only grew to be about that tall. They were rubbish. But I suddenly thought, so sunflowers have been with me. But then I started to give things out in my services. And I had a present chair for all my family so that they would have something to look forward to when they came in. But then I thought, well, if everybody could go away with something, they could have something to cherish from that experience. So I then started to give out sunflower seeds, which turned out to be, as ever, a gargantuan job, because you think, I'll just give it a few people a few seeds. And then
Mm-hmm.
200 people come to a funeral. So you've got to work that out somehow. But it was just emblematic, really, of light and hope and warmth.
Wow, what a story.
It's always a good story.
Yeah, because I remember my kids bringing the sunflower seeds, and I'm
Lovely.
not a gardener, right? But when I put them on put them on a ground, it just grows itself.
It's
It's a
magic.
beautiful, beautiful sunflower.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
and
also, the other great metaphor that I like is I nearly had a bulb, but I thought a bulb might be a bit esoteric. But the fact that bulbs go into the ground in the darkest, deepest, horriblest conditions and yet come up in the winter, and they keep coming every year and they get better every year. So I think bulbs and sunflowers are the biggest examples we have of just to try and keep going.
yeah. So, being like this COVID time, and you are self-employed as well, and then you are spreading the joyous life around the people who around you. You got your own group, and what can we do to spread the joy?
Look after each other. Look after each
Mm-hmm.
other. One of the things that took my breath away at the start of lockdown was my dad has a telephone list which he printed off from the computer, and everybody's name is on it. And he was very ill at the start of lockdown, and he has rung everybody up on that list to see if they're all right.
Mm-hmm.
And it took him 2.5 months because he couldn't do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
But he made sure that everybody had a phone call, and it was just the
Mm-hmm.
smallest gesture, so generous. But and texting people or sending them a card, or just one lovely girl turned up outside my door one day who I knew, and she said, is this where you live, Rebecca? And I said yes. And she was, I had only met her twice because she had done food shopping for my elderly neighbours.
Mm-hmm.
And that lovely, lovely gesture. And the silent, tiny treasures of giving and goodness are never lost. So if you can do a smallest thing, like be glad about the smallest thing, but give the smallest thing. I always
Mm-hmm.
try and think about the questions. What can I do to make it better? And then do it. And interestingly, people have a remarkable resourcefulness about them and creativity. And we often think if we can't do something enormous,
Mm-hmm.
there's no point. But the first thing we actually control is our temperaments and our attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I've noticed when people are at the end of their life or immobile is that they make that effort to be cheerful when the nurse comes to see them, or they ask the doctor how they are, or they say, I'm champion love, nothing wrong with me. And this resilient spirit. So the controlling of our own temperament, and that doesn't mean, running away from difficult emotions, but to try and give ourselves a bit of backbone and a bit of hope to other people. We are burying our sorrows in doing good works. That's one of my favorite poems ever. And I think that helps us. I think it keeps us sane.
Yeah, absolutely. You got me very excited here.
Do you know,
because I remember watching that TED talk a long time ago, and the message was, don't wait, just do what you can.
Yes.
Because people wait to become in a certain situation to help others. But no, we don't need to do that. It's tiny, like tiniest little gestures.
Yes.
That make a huge difference.
And it's not just that I've seen it thousands of times, because when you have, especially my funeral services in church, there would be hundreds and hundreds of people come. And I have to say, I think Sunderland is a very special place. I know the Northeast is precious and everywhere is precious, but the kind of family unity that I saw with families that had 3, 4, 5, 6 grown-up children, and the way they looked after their parents, but also the lovely wit and banter that they had together. So I've seen so much unity, and I've seen so many people make such a startling effort that I tell people they're heroic and they're courageous as many times as I can, because we think people who climb mountains are heroic. We think people who've been rescued from cliff edges, because they really are. The people who go out in the lifeboats are. But, sports people, famous people, they're blessed and they're gifted. But real heroes are the people who are put in very nasty situations that endure for a very long time. They make no fuss. They look to contribute. They try and be stronger, firmer, wiser, deeper from the experience. And they are not embittered. And to manage to come out of great trauma and be stronger because of it, I think that's the very definition of being courageous.
Wow. Yeah. So let's talk about the words. You are my life joy. I love your life joy. The most powerful words you use all the time.
I try to use good words because, principally, when I was so ill, I had to find ways to cope mentally, because when I used to get a cold, which was like a tiny little cold, that would put me back in bed probably 3 weeks, really, really poorly, from a trifling infection. And then it would take me another 3 or 4 weeks to get back to the very meager levels of health that I was. So infection's always been an absolute nightmare. And the funny thing about it was that when you're enforced to be still for so long, and essentially you're a very chatty person and you have, a lot of energy mentally and spiritually, to be physically so reduced is very humbling. So I spent a lot of time having to think and be quiet and dark and still, because often I couldn't manage watching telly or any noise. So I had to use that time to good purpose. So I think about how I would live if I were to improve, what would be my values. And I tried to think that I would live simply and generously and sustainably. And how would I do that? Well, the first thing is our attitudes and values, our behaviors, but also what we say to people and how we behave is the greatest power we have. And at the end of every service, I always said, please try and say this to somebody. And you say it in your own way, whatever you can do. But if you can say, thank you for loving me so well, I will love you eternally. You are my great blessing in life. You have given me such joy. You are my greatest treasure. Well, if you tell somebody you are my greatest joy, what goodness that spreads, doesn't it? It gives people confidence and hope and security.
Yeah.
And my mum, when I was very little, she used to call me treasure. She used to say, and I used to think, I'm her treasure. Of all the things in the world I could be, she thinks I'm a treasure. And I used to think that's so lovely. So I think
you do that. You
treasure.
send messages saying,
I do.
my treasure, and then I'm just, wow. That's just like...
Yes. Well, you are a treasure, Suki, to many, and you facilitate treasuredom.
So, oh, thank you. So let's talk about, because I've seen like loads of people. It's coming over right. Okay, so I've seen your affirmation cards, and then lots of people use affirmations. And tell me about it. And that's like very simple reminder for us that we need to live well. And then it's not just for us, and we need to spread that love and joy to others.
Yes. And when we've chatted before, we talked about how we approach people and how we behave and how they behave. And I'm not unrealistic. I know there is very disappointing behavior in the world. I know we can lack boundaries, and there is unkindness and bullying and all of that difficulty. But I found affirmation cards many years ago when one of my lovely friends bought me some. I think she's watching tonight, Kelly, bravest girl on the planet. And they were big. And I remember thinking I could do with having this something in my purse or in my pocket, and nothing ever came to it. And then I was lots of people have bought my book, which was interesting. But then there were people who effectively weren't book people or readers. And I thought, well, they seem to like what I offer. What could I offer them that's accessible and easy? So I came up with the idea of having 32 affirmation cards that were business card size. I'll just, here. There's one.
Yeah, please.
Yes,
yeah.
Rejoice often. And then they make a sunflower. There, it's quite hard to do it on the screen. There.
Yeah.
And so there's 32 of them. And there was one for every day of the month, but there was a spare one so that you could give it to somebody who was in need. And they all made up sets of 4 for sunflower. So you could give more than one away if you wanted to. But it was about passing that on. And also very short, wise, thoughtful pieces that were not promising the earth, that were not ridiculously optimistic, that were not negative, that were not promising you the earth, but that would just help you to help yourself a bit.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from. But then, like the sunflower seeds and like 100 like 100 meditations that turned into a 300, my husband came up with a bright idea. He said, well, you could sew them a little sunflower bag to keep them in.
Oh.
So there are 95 sunflower bags ready because 5 have already gone today.
Yeah, but like, let's think, Rebecca, if I get that little cards with full of joy and meaning, and that's proper gift, isn't it? It's not the shoes. It's not
we talked about shoes, didn't we?
Yeah, it's proper thing. It's meaningful, and that's the best gift ever you could have.
Thank you.
Someone. Yeah, that's just.
In some ways, we've all got a lot of stuff now, haven't we? And
yeah.
But
everyone needs like minimalism. That's like should be in everyone's goal. Yeah.
Yes. And I've got healthier the less I had. Which is, essentially. But my poor husband comes home from work and half of his wardrobe is decluttered, so he doesn't know what belongs to him anymore. He said, I thought I had 10 ties, but now I've only got 3.
Yeah. Because I remember one of my friends was saying, if you have 10 pen, you won't look after them. But if you have 2, you will look after it.
Right. You see, you're very wise.
Yeah. So, because like during this COVID, you've been self-employed person, and we are part of Mint Club as well. So let's talk about how people can support each other, and then obviously like supporting each other, that's like part of being joyful and spreading the happiness. And
yes, I think supporting each other is also, it all starts, I always think about your soul as being a tiny tea light in your hand, and then your character becomes bigger and your personality grows from that, and it goes in and out. So I think supporting each other is seeing the light within each other, but it's encouraging. And it doesn't mean that everything has to be fabulous and wonderful 24 hours a day and that it'll be easy, because so much of life is not easy, and so much of it is a roller coaster. And I think for a lot of us, we haven't had many ups and downs. What we've had is a lot of lovely normality, where everybody's gone to school, everybody's been well, we've had holidays and weekends and hobbies and jobs and husbands and children and grandmas, and we've had all that lovely, lovely normality. And when some of that is taken away, I mean, any change is stressful, even if it's self-induced. But when it's externally imposed, it becomes more demanding. So we feel we have less control. So one of the things, when you have very little control, I always find, is to ask myself, what am I doing that is helping? And what should I be doing? Because a lot of us know there's things we should do and we put them off. So I think it was much easier in the first weeks of lockdown, because we all, we went for our hours exercise, and we tidied our houses, and we painted the fences, or whatever those things were. But we're beginning to run out of those things, and obviously money is a very pressing issue. So supporting each other is not just an emotional thing, it's a physical thing. And if you're just all right, then food bank, you can put some stuff in the food bank trolley. You can give somebody a tenner in a charity. You can do these small, consistent things if you're in a reasonable position. And there are, innumerous places that need help. So if you just do something, one of the things that I did, which I found exponentially helpful, was that I decided I was going to give some money away every month. And we did this when we were really hard up, so it wasn't easy. And I would give it something every month to a different charity. And I would find charities that were tiny, obscure, and not very popular, and nobody knew about. And I found some essentially magnificent people and causes. And that made me feel better. But one of the organisations that I have most to do with is Sunderland Headlight. And I'm very privileged to be a patron of their charity. And, even if you give a £5 a month to Headlight, you're doing an awful lot to help, and you're helping a stranger. Because when we help each other, we're being good. When we help people we know, but we don't particularly adore, we're great. But I think when we help people we don't know, we're building the bridge. And that's, again, quiet, tiny treasure work that has a myriad of outcomes. It's a packet of seeds that cheers somebody up. It's an affirmation card that lifts somebody. It's a phone call. It's a text. It's a donation. It's a volunteering. It's what we can do, and then how well we behave doing it. I think that would be my suggestion to cope, but also make a list of the things that you could do to put yourself in a better position, help somebody else, and then put them in an order, and then do it, because lots of us think about things and then don't actually get around to doing it. But everywhere, you'll laugh at this, I have a pad everywhere. I've always got one next to me. I've got one in every room, so that whatever's in my head doesn't just sit there and stew. It comes out and it goes in an order somewhere. And I learnt most of that from having an illness that was very misunderstood. I was physically very ill and had very little treatment, very little help. So I was absolutely on my own with it, apart from my wonderful parents. So then you're suddenly absolutely isolated in a way that's very rare. And then when I was essentially looking after my mum for so long, I learned about being resourceful in a different kind of way, about trying to just make her a bit more comfortable. And I couldn't cure anything, and I couldn't solve anything. But if she had pajamas that were very soft, her skin would be better. you know, and if I went a lot, my very presence was of some use, I hope. I don't know. Sometimes I think she liked other visitors more than me, but the very hours of being on that bed with her, trying to keep her safe, trying to look after her as she had looked after me, I hope it had some value. So never underestimate the power of a small, consistent gesture.
Yeah, I'm just captivated by your answers and what you're saying, and we have so many comments.
I can't see any comments.
And I've been just listening to you. I'm probably the better just like watching you, I guess. So it would be really nice if you guys, thank you very much, and so lovely comments. And if you have any questions, add in your comment, and I'm sure.
Oh, there's Kelly. I've just seen Kelly.
To...
Kelly and Fliss.
Yeah,
oh, Fliss is a beautiful
here.
soul.
Yeah, Fliss is here.
These are the leaders of our world, these women. And I also think sometimes when people behave in, I call it disappointing manner, because that's easier than saying it's disgraceful or they're terrible or they're bullying me or any of those things, is to try and view it in that way, and then either not expose yourself to too much toxicity, but also to just try and have wise boundaries that protect you, but also might help them a bit in some ways.
Boundaries are important.
Yes. And also, it's a very difficult thing, I find, continually, especially with our lovely godchildren, is for them to be beautiful, pure, kind, giving souls and to survive in the outside world, you know, and to not have to deal with difficulties in the playground that just grow in the workplace, don't they, at times? Yeah. So for people to be able to have an ability to defend themselves without being nasty, but to let their logic, their excellence, to defy any prejudice or difficulty, I find that's the way for nice people to survive in the world, rather than, you know, try and descend.
Very good. Yeah, boundaries are the most important things, because I'm still learning. I can't believe it's 7:50, Rebecca. That time has flown by. Where can people find you and join the Lifejoy Festival and follow you? What can they do?
Well, thank you for asking that. There are two main ways, and please join my email list, because it's weekly videos and hopeful joy that just comes to your inbox, and that's on www.drrebecca.org.uk. And there's a page of giveaways to just help you. If you're struggling, go on that giveaways page, download the lot. It'll occupy you for an afternoon. And please join that. There's also a Facebook group, and my lovely friend Deepo set this up, and Fliss started it, and it's called Lifejoy Learning with Dr. Rebecca, and that's a Facebook group. So if you like my Facebook page, Dr. Rebecca, speaker and author, you can come in the group and we will welcome you with open arms. And the joy in that group is phenomenal. I go in my own group and they cheer me up. It's wonderful. they're just beautiful souls, and I try and set a tone and objectives for us that will just help us. And the biggest thing I could suggest about enduring difficulty is just get to lunchtime. If you're having a terrible morning, just get to 12 o'clock. And if it's still no better, get to tea time. And just crack off the difficult hours as if you're doing a prison sentence, and you will get through some of your time. And that great difficulty can be endured. You are stronger than you know. And also, there is much more help around than you realise. So if you need help, to ask for it as well.
Thanks so much. So my last question. That's your most favourite quote?
It is.
That's what you follow?
It is. It's from a beautiful hymn called Great Is Thy Faithfulness, and it's my dad's favourite hymn. And it doesn't matter what you believe, I think that quote says everything. And morning by morning, new mercies I see, strength for today, bright hope for tomorrow. And that doesn't mean that life is easy or plain sailing, but yet we have resources within us and help. And also that we can despair, and we can be... I took my mother's funeral, and I said in her funeral that it is possible to go through hell and survive. Even if you can't survive, somebody can drag you through. And the bright hope for tomorrow is the people who drag you through, whether it's just by the scruff of your neck or your hand. So that is the quote that holds my soul together, despite, considerable challenge. And that is the essence, really. And all the hymns that I really love were written by women, which I think is hilarious. There wasn't a place for us for so long. And then somebody once rang me up to take a funeral, and they went through 7 men's names. We can't get this person, we can't get this person, we can't get this person. And then they said, we're desperate, will you do it? And I thought, don't be desperate, come to me first. It's all right. But yes, I love that quote and I live by it. I try to anyway.
Thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on I'mPossible Conversation. Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you everyone who's joined us, and hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you all next week. Thank you, Rebecca. It's been absolute pleasure.
Thank you. You are a joy. We're very blessed to have you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, darling. Bye. Bye, treasure.